My name is Austin Brown. I live in the town of Trafalgar, Indiana. I have lived in and about this area for the majority of the 43 years of my life. The reason that I'm here today is to talk about $30. I am a child of two disabled parents. They were not born disabled. They came to it later in life. My father was a disabled veteran. He was injured on Camp Atterbury when I was 5 years old. The Veterans Administration healthcare system ended up selecting a treatment regimen for him that was likely what needed to happen, but involved a significant amount of opioids and painkillers, along with other medications, because people who end up in his situation don't tend to live very long. And he proved them rather quite wrong on that, but as he kept going for quite a long time. Thankfully, I got to know the man very well over the course of his longer than expected life. My mother was born premature back in 1959. And at the time, incubators and things of this nature were rare. So she was kept in a chicken incubator for a period of time. She also did have what ended up being a degenerative condition of her back, which was extremely painful. She grew bone spikes, in fact, into her spinal cord that had to occasionally be surgically removed. And at one point was also treated with high levels of opiates. This caused an interesting home life for me. By the age of 11, I was doing much of the housework. Through some help of the family, we were able to keep a situation where I was kept with my parents. But it also, through the Veterans Administration, we did acquire a new home, the home that I currently live in. And it was in the very end of the process of moving from that prior home to the current home that my substance abuse journey started. My first taste of alcohol came when I was roughly my late 14, and then marijuana when I was 16. As I became one of the drivers of the house, my mother, during that rough time frame was when they had decided to stop her opioid regimen, so she ended up turning more to alcohol to solve her pain issues. I guess the important parts of my journey would be as I went to leave that situation. I go on to college. I had a scholarship for printing technology. I went to Vincennes University, as it was far enough away that I wouldn't be necessarily in all the day-to-day goings-on of my home, because I call my parents collectors, to be diplomatic about it, but ultimately they were hoarders. I ended up going to that university, and I joined a fraternity. It did, of course, create an even greater permissive environment for a rather excessive indulgence in alcohol, and certainly marijuana as well, and a whole other range of drugs became much more available. But I would always have a bottle of 100 proof whiskey or Southern Comfort under my desk. And if there was ever an actual party, as we had once a week, it was a rather common occurrence towards the end of that period where I would take a bottle of 100 proof Southern Comfort, and I would just spin the cap off of it at the beginning of the party, because I knew it was not going back on. That bottle would be empty by the end of the night. I began drinking to a point where I was drinking nearly every meal out of a bottle. I was drinking at least half the time. I would drink a half gallon of whiskey a day, and I was smoking about 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And that would have been starting in late October. By February of the next year, early February, around Valentine's Day, I got hospitalized. I had ruptured my esophagus, and was bleeding to the point that I lost so much blood that I ended up passing out at a stoplight as I tried to drive myself to the emergency room. That would have been one of the periods where I got the closest to, I actually did become completely sober. I quit smoking, I quit drinking, and I made a good go of that for close to a year. Over the course of time, the Job Corps facility, especially with all the different federal regulations and whatnot, their staffing became leaner and leaner. And I got to the point where I was working over 60 hours a week, 40 of it just on the weekends, because they just did not have anybody to work the weekends. So I'd be doing 18-hour shift, 4-hour nap, 18-hour shift, just running myself absolutely ragged, and I'd come off that last third shift and be just, I found a place to eat breakfast because I really just wanted to sit down and have a little bit of coffee. The Southern Comfort Cafe had moved over here to the old elementary school, and so I'd go in there and I'd have a couple cups of coffee and eat and kind of brace myself for what I was about to do next. And then following that, every day I would go home and I would see how much of a fifth of whiskey that I could drink before I passed out. And then I would spend the next day, my only day off of the week, hungover, generally doing very little to nothing as the housework or anything positive. That was probably when I noticed most the actual compulsion, because I had started to do what's called drunk dialing. I'd start to get very drunk and then start randomly calling people and having conversations I didn't remember. Then I started to try not to do that, and just drinking less wasn't something I could do. Like once I had those first couple shots, I was gonna finish the bottle or try. And that's when I really moved to trying to just not buy the bottle. And then I would keep finding myself at CVS at the counter. I'd tell myself all week, I'm not gonna drink, I'm not gonna drink. And then there I was, buying the next bottle of whiskey. And this really started to scare me, because before I could always, it was one of those, I could stop whenever I want to, and I could. But nah, for some reason now I couldn't. Well, and the restaurant that I was going to in the mornings had closed down there towards the end of my occupation there at Job Corps. But I had actually come to friend one of the little ladies there. And I got kind of interested in her life. It was a very sweet young woman. But I was very interested in trying to follow up with her and see how things had turned out and see how she was doing. And by some crazy happenstance, a local house of worship had decided to have a tent revival just across the street from the pizza place. As I was driving down the road, I happened to see a bright smiling face wearing a yellow safety vest, and just kind of pointed at her, and she noticed me, and she invited me to the tent revival. And that Sunday, of course, in my usual fashion, I was a touch hungover and a little bit, quite a bit late actually, and came in while the evangelist was in full swing. And while there were seats available in the back, for some reason, I was drawn towards the front. And then there was a call to the altar, and I'm not sure why or what. Well, at least I wasn't then. But I felt a pull towards the altar. I went up into the gathering of people, and I felt the grace and light of God wash over and through me. And in that moment, I asked for two favors. The first one, just simply to help me with the drinking. And the second one was for courage to speak the truth. The first one was, I didn't realize it at the time, but had been granted immediately. As soon as the dismissal happened, I immediately walked out to my car, and I had to really sort that out. The next day off I had, I tried to drink, and I didn't get drunk. Now, I did have a rather excessive tolerance for alcohol at the time, so being an experimental person, I thought, well, maybe I just didn't apply myself hard enough to this goal. So the next day off, I leaned into it really hard and tried to get drunk, and I managed to get drunk, but none of the temporary solace that would come with the drinking came that time. The next day, the hangover was less than I expected, and I was also missing the shame and the regret from having drank. And it was about that time that I realized I didn't have a compulsion to drink anymore. I was literally forcing myself to drink, almost just out of habit. And from that point forward, I have not had the desire to drink, and I have not. The reason that I started all this with the mention of $30 is because that $30 was the minimum that I would spend every single week for years on alcohol. So I feel that it's appropriate to, instead of poisoning myself, or well, more the point that I no longer have a desire to, that money is better placed in the hands of God to help the faithful.